It's been 1 month since the presidential election. Americans are getting better acquainted with the key players, policies, and plans of Donald Trump's second administration. And a majority of Americans say they like what they're seeing. A recent Pew Research poll found that more Americans approve than disapprove of President-elect Trump's policies and plans, 53% to 46%. And that same poll showed that 70% say that they are confident the transition between administrations will go smoothly. Compare that to 26% in 2020. We're going on the record with Scott Tranter to talk about the latest developments from the transition. Scott, as always, it's great to see you. Look, 8 years ago, it seemed like the Trump team was surprised to win, and they sort of struggled to get a lay of the land here in Washington. What do you think is different this time?
Well, I think they've got some of the people they had from last administration helping them on this transition. I think they expected, or at least thought they had a much better chance of winning. And those two things combined allowed them to, have some of their picks out the gate. I was looking at it. It looked like Hillary Clinton, when she was nominated for Secretary of State under the Obama administration, she wasn't announced until December. And so here we are, first week of December, and it looks like Donald Trump has at least nominated at least one time for all major positions. So certainly has their act together, but it looks like we're in for a fun, few months of confirmations because we've already lost a couple already. So we'll see how this goes over the next couple months.
So let's dive into some of those confirmations and the nominating process. I want to look at the status of where Trump's cabinet nominations are. Let's look at Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary. He's come under quite a bit of intense scrutiny over sexual misconduct allegations and reports he was forced to step down from two nonprofits due to mismanagement of funds, sexual impropriety, and intoxicated behavior. Trump's team says they aren't worried, but look, Scott, he doesn't seem to have all the Republican senators he needs locked up to get confirmed. Should Trump's team be worried?
Yeah, no, they absolutely should be worried, right? Like we've seen some of the key senators, Joni Ernst, Roger Wicker, some of these people who are going to sit on the committee, if he goes through confirmation, have not come out full throated and said yes, we're going to support him. They said we'd like to see these FBI background reports. We want to interview, and we want to take our role seriously. And these are some drip stories that we have seen ever since the announcement. You just showed some good pictures of him being, flanked by media on Capitol Hill, and we're not even near confirmation hearing time, and he's already being swamped. So we'll see if he can withstand some of this media scrutiny.
Well, and it's not only the media scrutiny. We're hearing that the Trump team is looking at replacements for Hegseth in case he can't be confirmed. A source confirmed to me that Trump has spoken with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and that DeSantis is seriously considering that position should Hegseth's nomination fall through. Scott, I want to talk Florida politics for a minute. Does this scenario make sense for the Florida governor and his political future?
So I'm smiling because basically, Julia, we're talking about 2028 already, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you're really asking me. Like, does this make sense? Does he take it? Does that mean that he can't prepare and do the final couple years of his governorship, potentially run in a couple years? That's exactly what we're talking about. I guarantee you, I don't have the sources you do, but I would bet money that that is what he is considering. Like, if I take this, am I hurting my presidential chances? So yeah, I think these are all calculations. They're all calculations in and around potential 2028 presidential run. My personal take is I would be surprised if Ron DeSantis ultimately takes it, even if offered or had the opportunity to take it, just because there was some bad blood coming out of the
Mm.
primary between him and Donald Trump, and once you're in Donald Trump's administration, you have to toe the line, and that's not something that Ron DeSantis has been able to do, ever since the primary. The primary season, and right now, Governor of Florida, he's been pretty good at it according to the voters the last few years, and he's got a couple of years left in his term. So I think that's probably the best political route for him. But Secretary of Defense is a big role and something he's going to have to. It looks like he might have to consider.
Yeah, certainly an interesting dynamic between those two, considering that Florida, between Trump and DeSantis, but particularly Trump, is really the center of Republican politics these days. And speaking of Florida, Florida Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz became the first Democrat to join the Congressional Delivering Outstanding Government Efficiency Caucus, also known as DOGE. this week, we've seen some agreement between Elon Musk and Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent progressive, on defense cuts, and even former Chicago mayor and ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, said Democrats should welcome the DOGE commission. Look, Scott, when it comes to how we're looking at DOGE, these government cuts, do you think we could see more bipartisanship on that end?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you look at Rahm Emanuel and with Bernie Sanders, is they were looking at the polling that you and I have been looking at the last couple of years, is the size of government and how government is working for the people or lack of working for the people is a bipartisan concern. How the Democrats look to fix it versus how the Republicans look to fix it is probably where some of the disagreement comes. But I think by and large, they all agree the size of government and how government works and how efficient it is needs to be changed. So I think this is you're seeing Jared Moskowitz, who tends to lead the charge on some of these types of aisle crossing initiatives, things like that. And Bernie Sanders, I saw that, I was a little bit surprised, but it's a good bipartisan tack to say, yeah, let's take a look at whether government works or not and see if we need the size of it. I think it'll come down to, a lot of Democratic voters would like to see the Department of Defense budget and military industrial complex make smaller, whereas you have the Republicans saying, do we need a Department of Education? So philosophically, I think there's some alignment. It'll be interesting how it breaks down when they actually have to do some of these things.
Yeah, I was chatting with our friend Chris Sirewall over at News Nation on air the other night, and he made the point that while Bernie Sanders might want to see cuts to the Defense Department, he and Democrats don't want to see those cuts in other departments like Health and Human Services or education. So we'll see, where there's disagreement and agreement in the new administration with Democrats in this House and the Senate. So I want to switch gears and talk about the current president, President Biden. Over the holiday weekend, he pardoned his son Hunter. We've heard a lot of reaction from Republican and Democratic lawmakers. A lot of it negative towards President Biden. But what reaction are you hearing from voters and people outside of the political sphere?
So, we're a month out. I haven't seen any good hard polling on this, but we're going to see some probably the next time we chat. I'll have seen some national polling on it, but I would imagine, look, Donald Trump made no attempt to obfuscate or dance around that. He said if he was going to win, he was going to, end as he used his term, the witch hunts against him. So whether you like that or not, at least he came out and said it. Whereas Joe Biden, said on the record clips, very unequivocally, he was not going to pardon his son. So I think that is something the voters are going to look at, and they're going to determine whether that is hypocrisy and something to tarnish, or something they're going to say, hey, it's his son. It's, why are we surprised about this? I tend to think some of the independent voters are going to look at that unfavorably, but I think largely the Republican voters are going to react the way they have, surprise, shock, and say, hey, this is normal. This is who Biden is. And I think you're seeing some of the core base Democratic voters say, no, it's his son. This is not someone to worry about. But I think it's those independents we're going to look at. And I happen to think we're probably going to see them not necessarily like it. But we'll see some polling here later December, I'm sure.
And we talk about that, immediate reaction, the polling in the, weeks following the pardon. But look, President Biden, he's going to be a former president. He's been someone who's been in public service for, 50 years now. What impact does this pardon ultimately have on his legacy?
It's certainly going to be, look, we're talking about a president who the first time in history looked like he was about to accept his nomination, or at least recent history, accept his nomination and then give it up for his VP. So, that'll be a part of his legacy. A part of his legacy will be, running a couple of times. He's got a lot of big legacy points. This will certainly be one of them. I don't know if it'll be a defining one, but it'll certainly be one that his detractors use to say he's not necessarily the greatest president, or even a great president on that fact. But this is going to be one of some major firsts and major historical points for his presidency. He's got quite a few of them.
I want to stick with Democrats here and talk about the field of candidates running for the Democratic National Committee chair. It is certainly solidifying. We're seeing Ben Wickler from the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Minnesota Democratic Party Chairman Ken Martin jump in, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, New York State Senator James Skoufis, and there's some who are rumored to be considering that post. But I wanted to get your take before we go, Scott. Who is seen as the strongest candidate at the moment?
Look, I think if you're an establishment, you look at Martin O'Malley and say, hey, this guy's a proven fundraiser, this guy's a proven operative, a proven winner. I think you look at a couple of those folks out of Wisconsin and Minnesota as probably some fresh blood and potentially maybe some new ideas. I think, look, if you remember, we got Pete Buttigieg because, a small mayor out of Indiana said, hey, I think I can lead this party. And he came out of nowhere, and initially everyone made fun of him, and he had some good speeches, and he ultimately didn't win, but he catapulted himself to the spotlight, and, now he's the outgoing Secretary of Transportation and former presidential candidate, and probably still in the mix. So I think that's what a lot of these candidates are looking at. They're looking at what Pete Buttigieg did coming out of 2016 and saying, hey, I have an opportunity to raise my profile. I've got some good ideas for the Democratic Party, and see whether I make it or not. Does this place me as one of the party players going forward? So I expect the candidates you mentioned to be a part of it, but I think we might see a few more come out of the woodwork, because a lot of people look at this as an opportunity to raise their profile.
Certainly an opportunity to raise their profile, but a lot of pressure, given the loss Democrats had just last month. As always, thanks, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for What's America's Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel.